The Zoom call felt like a trap, the screen's blue hue casting an eerie glow on my face as I stared into the eyes of my former colleagues. A sterile office backdrop loomed behind them, devoid of warmth, and my heart raced with a mix of dread and disbelief. "We appreciate your contributions, Olivia," the HR representative said, her voice dripping with forced empathy. I could hear the faint echo of laughter behind her, the kind that stung like a slap, as if they found amusement in my impending dismissal. The words "fired" and "restructuring" echoed in my mind, each syllable a dagger twisting deeper into my pride. I felt the humiliation wash over me, a cold wave that left me gasping for air, desperate to understand what had led to this moment. As the call continued, I watched the smirks on their faces, their eyes glinting with a cruel satisfaction. My former boss leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a self-satisfied grin plastered on his face. I had seen that look before, the one that signified a power play, a final move in a game where I was nothing more than a pawn. Unexpected disappointment, I thought bitterly, my mind racing. I had poured my heart into this company, sacrificing weekends and holidays, only to be reduced to a punchline in their corporate narrative. The call ended, and I sat in silence, the weight of my termination settling heavily in the air. My fingers trembled as I closed the laptop, the finality of the moment hitting me like a freight train. I could almost hear my mother's worried voice in my head, reminding me to be strong, to rise above the chaos. But how could I? I felt stripped of my identity, my worth, as if the company had erased everything I had built. I leaned back in my chair, the leather cold against my skin, and closed my eyes, trying to quell the storm of emotions inside me. Memories flooded back, moments of laughter shared with my team, the camaraderie we had built over late nights and tight deadlines. But those memories felt tainted now, overshadowed by the betrayal of my colleagues. As I sat there, anger coursing through me, I realized I had a choice to make. I could wallow in despair, or I could fight back. My heart raced with the thought of revenge, a fire igniting within me. I would not let them think they could discard me so easily. I would remind them who truly controlled the narrative of our $720 partnership. The tension in my chest tightened as I replayed the moments leading up to the call. I could still hear the laughter during our last office meeting when my boss had made a joke at my expense. "You've always been a great sport, Olivia," he had chuckled, and the laughter had erupted around the room, leaving me feeling small and insignificant. In that moment I had laughed along, masking the embarrassment that bubbled beneath the surface. But now I felt a determination rising within me, a resolve to reclaim my power. I would not be silenced. I would gather my resources and plan my next move. The anger I felt was no longer just a reaction. It was a catalyst for change. I would show them that my silence was never consent, and I would rise from the ashes of this humiliation stronger than before. "This ends with me," I thought, as I wiped away the remnants of my tears and began to formulate a plan. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with a newfound clarity. The journey ahead would be treacherous, but I was ready to embrace it. I would navigate this corporate battlefield with cunning and strategy, and I would not rest until I had disrupted their plans. And in that moment I felt a flicker of hope, ignited by the thought that my story was far from over. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow that did little to lift my spirits. I stood at the counter, surrounded by the comforting scents of freshly brewed coffee and warm toast, yet I felt a heaviness in my chest that no amount of caffeine could alleviate. My phone buzzed on the countertop, a reminder of the impending confrontation with my colleagues. I had barely slept the night before, the humiliation of the Zoom call replaying in my mind like a relentless loop, each iteration deepening my resolve. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about how I had always been the reliable one in the office, the person who kept the team together during the chaos of deadlines and corporate restructures. Memories of laughter shared over lunch breaks flooded my mind, but now those moments felt tainted. I recalled the last office lunch when we celebrated a project milestone. My boss had raised a toast and I had smiled, feeling appreciated, but that gratitude had swiftly evaporated, replaced by the sharp sting of betrayal. I had poured my heart into that company, only to find myself discarded like yesterday's news. Determined not to let despair consume me, I pulled out my laptop and opened the document where I had begun jotting down my thoughts. I needed a plan, a strategy to confront the people who had so easily dismissed me. My fingers danced across the keyboard, typing out my feelings, my memories, and my intentions. "I refuse to be a," I wrote, the words imbued with a fierce determination. The thought of reclaiming my dignity sparked a fire within me, and I could almost hear my mother's voice reminding me of my worth, urging me to rise above the ashes. Later that day, I found myself in the office cafeteria, surrounded by the familiar hum of chatter and the clinking of silverware. I could see my former colleagues gathered at a table, their laughter ringing out like daggers in my heart. I hesitated, feeling the weight of their gazes, but I pushed through the knot of uncertainty in my stomach. I needed to confront them to reclaim my narrative. As I approached, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. Olivia one of my former teammates called out, feigning surprise. We thought you were too busy with your new plans. The laughter that followed felt like a punch, but I held my head high, refusing to let them see my pain. I'm not done, I replied, my voice steady despite the tremors of fear beneath the surface. I'm here to discuss what happened last. The table fell silent, the jovial atmosphere dissipating like smoke in the wind. I could see their expressions shift from amusement to discomfort, and I savored the moment. You may have dismissed me, but I will not be erased. My words hung in the air, heavy with significance, and I could feel the tension building around us. I was no longer just a pawn in their game, I was a force to be reckoned with. After the confrontation, I returned home, the weight of my actions settling on my shoulders. My partner was waiting for me, concern etched across their face. You're not thinking about going back there, are you? They asked, their voice laced with worry. They'll just hurt you again. But I shook my head resolute. I have to do this. I need to show them that they can't just toss me aside. My heart raced at the thought of what lay ahead. I could feel the anticipation building, a mix of fear and excitement swirling within me. I was on the brink of something monumental, and I would not back down. The stakes were high, but so was my determination to reclaim my place and disrupt their plans. The fluorescent lights in the office flickered overhead, casting a harsh glow that felt unwelcoming. I could hear the muted buzz of conversations around me, the clatter of keyboards and the occasional laughter, but all of it felt distant, as if I were submerged beneath the surface of a cold ocean. My stomach churned as I approached my boss's office, a well-polished door that seemed to mock my very presence. I had always prided myself on my work ethic, yet here I was, caught in a web of corporate politics that threatened to suffocate me. As I knocked, the sound echoed in the otherwise quiet corridor. My boss called out, and I stepped inside, my palms slick with sweat. The office was a shrine to corporate success, adorned with awards and framed accolades, yet it felt more like a mausoleum than a place of achievement. My heart raced as I took a seat across from him, the leather chair feeling foreign beneath me. I could feel the weight of his gaze, assessing, judging. I was a contestant on a game show, and I knew the stakes were my career. Olivia, he began, his tone casual yet edged with an underlying tension. We need to discuss your performance. My stomach sank. Performance reviews were seldom positive, but I had worked tirelessly, often sacrificing my own well-being for the sake of the team. I've been getting some, he continued, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled as if to suggest he held all the cards. The words that followed felt like daggers, each one aimed at my pride. There have been complaints about your communication style. Some of the team feels undermined in meetings. I could feel my breath hitch in my throat. Undermined. But I've always encouraged open dialogue. I protested, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He shrugged, a dismissive gesture that stung more than it should have. Perception is reality, Olivia. You need to adjust your approach. I could feel my heart pounding, the sound of it drowning out the rest of his words. I'm trying to be helpful. I insisted, my voice rising slightly. It's not my fault if they misinterpret my intentions. A tense silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, anger and humiliation intertwining. You know how competitive it is here. He finally said after a long pause, his tone softer but no less critical. We can't afford to have anyone jeopardizing our goals. His words felt like a betrayal, a stab in the back from someone I had considered a mentor. I had poured my soul into this job, and yet here I was on the brink of being deemed replaceable. Later that week, I overheard whispers in the break room. Did you hear about Olivia? One colleague asked, her voice low and conspiratorial. I heard she's on thin ice. The laughter that followed felt like shards of glass slicing through my skin. I gritted my teeth, fury bubbling beneath the surface as I listened to their disdainful remarks. She thinks she's indispensable, but they're just waiting for the right moment to cut her loose. I wanted to confront them, to scream that I was not a failure, that I had given everything for this team. But the words stuck in my throat, trapped beneath the weight of their judgment. I felt like a ghost, haunting the very place I had once cherished, now reduced to a figure of ridicule. The day of the performance review arrived, and my heart raced with dread. I stepped into the conference room where the HR representative sat, a forced smile plastered on her face. The bright lights felt blinding, and I wondered if they could see the fear in my eyes. We appreciate your contributions, Olivia, she began, but her words felt hollow, devoid of sincerity. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat a reminder of my vulnerability. As the meeting progressed, I could feel my resolve waver. We believe it's time to consider your future here, she continued, and I could hear the faint echo of laughter from the other side of the wall, a cruel reminder that I was the punchline in someone else's joke. We think it might be best for you to explore other opportunities, I blinked rapidly, trying to process what I was hearing. You firing me, I asked, my voice shaking. The confirmation felt like a punch to the gut, and I fought to maintain my composure. It's a restructuring, not a personal attack, she replied, but I could see the smug satisfaction in her eyes. A whirlwind of emotions coursed through me, anger, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. I had given my all to this company, and yet they were ready to throw me away like a used tissue. I will not be reduced to a punchline, I thought fiercely, the fire within me reigniting. As I left the building, each step felt heavier, the weight of my termination settling like a shroud around my shoulders. The world outside was bright, but I felt numb, lost in a sea of anguish and frustration. I could hear the laughter of my colleagues ringing in my ears, taunting me, daring me to retaliate. Their perception of me as replaceable would be shattered, I vowed. I would show them the true value of my contributions, and this humiliation would not be my end, it would be my beginning. In the days that followed, I began to gather my thoughts, jotting down everything I had experienced, all the injustices I had faced. The more I wrote, the clearer my path became. I was not just going to sit idly by. I would take action. I would rise from the ashes of this humiliation, fueled by the desire to prove myself. The fire of resolve burned brighter within me, and I was ready to take the next step, whatever that might be. With each passing hour, my determination solidified. I would not let them dismiss my worth. I would reclaim my narrative and disrupt their plans. I was ready to take back control, to remind them that I was not easily forgotten. My next step was crucial, and I was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The battle had just begun, and I was armed with the knowledge of my own value. The injustice I had faced would not define me. Instead, it would fuel my fire. I would rise stronger, ready to disrupt their complacency and reclaim what was rightfully mine. The shadows of my dimly lit living room seemed to whisper secrets of betrayal as I sank into the worn leather of my couch, the fabric cold against my skin. The silence surrounding me felt heavy, almost suffocating, echoing the tumult of emotions swirling in my chest. I had been unceremoniously cast aside, a mere casualty of corporate politics, and the weight of that realization pressed down on me like a leaden blanket. I held my phone tightly, its cool surface a stark contrast to the heat spreading through my cheeks, remembering the smug expressions that had greeted me during my firing. I closed my eyes, and memories flooded back. The laughter in the boardroom during my last meeting, the way my colleagues had snickered at my expense, felt like daggers piercing my pride. "You're such a good sport, Olivia," my boss had laughed, and in that moment I had laughed along, but now, the laughter sounded like a taunt ringing in my ears. I was furious at myself for allowing their mockery to diminish my worth. The betrayal was palpable, a bitter taste on my tongue as I replayed that humiliating Zoom call, the echo of their condescension haunting me. I reached for my laptop, the familiar keyboard feeling like a lifeline. I opened a new document and began typing furiously, pouring out my thoughts and feelings. The act of writing was cathartic. It was a way to regain control over the narrative they had tried to strip from me. "They think they can erase me, but I won't let them," I typed, the words taking shape as a manifesto of my defiance. The more I wrote, the clearer my intentions became. I would not be a victim. I would rise, armed with the truth of my contributions and the fire of my indignation. As night fell, the city outside my window glittered with lights, but I felt isolated, a lone figure amidst the urban sprawl. I picked up my phone again, contemplating calling my best friend, someone who had always been my sounding board. Just as I was about to dial, my partner walked into the room, their expression a mix of concern and resignation. "Olivia, you need to think this through. Going after them could be dangerous," they cautioned, their voice steady yet filled with an undercurrent of worry. I felt a surge of frustration. "You don't understand, they've taken everything from me. I need to make them see what they've done." My voice rose, infused with a mix of desperation and determination. I could see my partner's brow furrow in concern, the lines of worry deepening on their forehead. They opened their mouth to respond, but I cut them off. "I can't just sit back and let this happen. I won't be forgotten." Their silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken words. I could feel my heart racing, a mix of anxiety and anger coursing through me. I was caught between the desire for revenge and the rational voice urging me to tread carefully. I paced the room, my fingers running through my hair in frustration, the tension palpable. My thoughts spiraled. Would my actions lead to more consequences than I was prepared to handle? Yet the thought of remaining passive felt like a betrayal to myself. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the storm brewing inside me. My mind drifted to the $720 partnership that was now at risk because of my dismissal. The thought fueled my resolve. I had been a key player in that deal, and I couldn't let my former colleagues forget it. They had underestimated me, and that miscalculation would be their downfall. I envisioned their faces as I disrupted their plans, the shock and disbelief mingling with regret. I knew that I could turn the tide in my favor, but I needed a strategy that was both clever and calculated. As I resumed typing, the words flowed like a river, each keystroke a step closer to reclaiming my power. I envisioned my plan taking shape, a series of calculated moves that would put me back in control. I would gather evidence, connect with former clients, and remind them of my contributions. I could almost hear my mother's voice echoing in my mind, urging me to stand tall, to fight back. I felt invigorated, the fire of determination burning bright within me. Hours passed, and the glow of my laptop screen illuminated the room like a beacon of hope. I typed late into the night, crafting a blueprint for my comeback. I refused to let this betrayal define me. Instead, I would channel it into something greater. The darkness of my emotions transformed into a powerful drive propelling me forward. I would disrupt their complacency, and in doing so, I would reclaim not just my dignity but my rightful place in the corporate world. The stakes were high, but I was ready to meet the challenge head-on, fueled by the knowledge that I was not done yet. This was just the beginning of my journey, and I was prepared to take back control of my narrative. The fluorescent lights buzzed above as I entered the conference room, a sterile environment that felt more like a cage than a place for dialogue. The long table, polished to a shine, reflected the tension in the air, and I could almost taste the anticipation mingling with the faint scent of stale coffee. I took a deep breath, trying to channel my hope into something tangible, something that would help bridge the chasm that had formed between me and my former colleagues. As I settled into my chair, memories of laughter and camaraderie washed over me, but they felt distant, like echoes from a past life. I was determined to reach out, to find common ground, to show them that we could move forward, but the specter of my firing loomed large in my mind. I could feel my heart racing, my palms slightly clammy against the cool surface of the table as I prepared to speak. "Thank you for meeting with me today," I began, my voice steady, masking the storm of emotions beneath. I glanced around the room, catching the wary expressions on their faces. They were cautious, eyes flickering with doubt as if they were unsure whether I was there to fight or reconcile. I pressed on, hoping to break through the barriers. "I know things have been difficult lately. I want to find a way to work together again. The partnership we have is worth fighting for, and I believe we can still achieve great things. We just need to communicate better." The silence that followed felt like a weight pressing down on me, heavy and suffocating. I watched as my former colleagues exchanged glances, their body language closed off, arms crossed defensively. I could sense their skepticism, but I refused to let it deter me. I had come too far to back down now. One of them, a former ally, finally spoke up, their voice laced with hesitation. "Olivia, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but the reality is that trust has been broken. We're in a delicate position, and we can't afford to make any missteps. You must understand that it's not just about wanting to work together. It's about the perception of the team as well." Their words stung, and I felt a flash of anger mixed with disappointment. I had expected resistance, but the coldness of their rejection pierced deeper than I anticipated. I fought the urge to lash out, to remind them of my contributions and the value I brought to the table. Instead, I took a moment to collect my thoughts, reminding myself that I was here to seek resolution, not to ignite further conflict. "I understand that trust takes time to rebuild, but I am willing to put in the effort," I replied, my voice firm yet measured. "I want to prove to you that I can be a valuable asset, that I can help us navigate this turbulent time. Let's work on this together." The atmosphere in the room shifted slightly, but it was fleeting. I could see the wheels turning in their minds, but no one spoke up to embrace my olive branch. Instead, the tension returned, thickening like fog. I felt my shoulders slump slightly as the realization hit me. This wasn't going to be as easy as I had hoped. Later, when I gathered my things and headed out, the disappointment settled in my chest like a stone. I had gone in with a hopeful heart, yet I was met with walls that felt insurmountable. The break room was quiet as I passed through, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the silence. I leaned against the counter, staring into my half-empty coffee cup, the bitter taste mirroring my mood. I knew I had to try again, but each attempt felt like climbing a mountain with no summit in sight. The thought of reaching out to them again filled me with dread, yet I couldn't shake the desire for resolution. I wanted to protect the partnership that meant so much to the company, but I also needed to protect myself. The stakes were too high and I couldn't afford to lose my footing again. As I sat in my car, staring at the office building, I felt the weight of my failure pressing down on me. My phone buzzed beside me, a message from my best friend offering encouragement. I could hear her voice in my head, reminding me that setbacks were part of the journey. I took a deep breath, remembering that I was stronger than this moment. Yet as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling of disappointment. I had wanted to negotiate peace, to find a common ground, but the refusal of my efforts felt like a door slamming shut. I would need to regroup, to reassess my strategies. The battle was far from over, and I would not let their dismissal define my worth. I would rise, even if it took every ounce of strength I had left. The walls of my home office felt like they were closing in around me as I sat at my cluttered desk, surrounded by crumpled notes and half-empty coffee cups. The dim light from my desk lamp flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced like my racing thoughts. I took a deep breath, the scent of stale coffee mingling with the faint aroma of lavender from a candle I had lit earlier. This was it. I could feel the weight of my determination pressing down, urging me to take action. Just hours ago, I had received a call from an old contact, a reminder that I was not alone in this fight. The words of my best friend echoed in my mind, her unwavering belief in my strength igniting a fire within me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the precipice of something monumental. I needed to remind my former colleagues that I was an essential part of the $720 partnership, not just a discarded piece of their corporate puzzle. As I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminated my face, revealing the resolve etched into my features. I started typing furiously, outlining every detail of my plan, each keystroke a declaration of my intent. I would gather evidence, contact former clients, and leverage my knowledge of the partnership to disrupt their complacency. Images of their shocked faces when I executed my plan filled my mind, and a surge of adrenaline coursed through my veins. I could almost hear my mother's voice urging me to reclaim my dignity. The thought of standing before them with confidence, of proving my worth, sent shivers down my spine. I had been stripped of my identity, but now I felt it returning, piece by piece, as I crafted a strategy that would show them just how wrong they had been to underestimate me. The tension in my chest tightened with each passing moment. Doubts flickered like the lamp's erratic light, whispering that I might fail, that my efforts could lead to more humiliation. But I silenced those thoughts, focusing instead on the thrill of anticipation. I had the power to change the narrative, to forge a new path that would not only reclaim my place, but also disrupt the very foundation they thought they had built without me. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, and paced the small space of my office. Each step felt like a march toward reclaiming my life, my worth, and my dignity. I envisioned my colleagues, their expressions turning from amusement to shock as I laid bare the truth of my contributions and the value I had brought to the partnership. I would not be erased, I would be a force to be reckoned with. With a final look at my notes, I knew I was ready to execute my plan. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me, sharpening my focus on the task ahead. The fear of failure was no match for the fire of determination that now burned brightly within me. I would rise from the ashes of this humiliation, and when I did, they would remember my name. This was my turning point, the moment I took back control. The stakes were high, but I was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. My fight was just beginning, and I would not back down. I grabbed my phone, my heart racing as I prepared to make the first call in my plan. I would remind them who truly held the power in this partnership. This was no longer just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my place in a world that had tried to cast me aside. I was ready. "This ends with me," I whispered to myself, my resolve solidifying with those words as I dialed the number, ready to disrupt their plans and make my mark once again. The soft glow of my laptop screen illuminated the room as I sat in the dim light of my living room, surrounded by scattered notes and empty coffee cups. Each piece of paper was a testament to the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in my mind, the inked lines filled with ideas and strategies for my comeback. I took a moment to breathe, inhaling deeply the faint aroma of stale coffee, which mixed with the lingering scent of determination. It was time to turn my humiliation into a weapon, a tool for my reclamation. I began to type, the rhythmic tapping of keys a soothing metronome against the backdrop of my racing heart. My plan was taking shape, a mosaic of calculated moves designed to disrupt the very foundation of the company that had discarded me. I envisioned how I would gather evidence of my contributions, reminding everyone of the value I had brought to the table, and how the loss of my expertise could jeopardize the crucial $720 partnership. Each word I typed felt like a step closer to reclaiming my narrative. My fingers hesitated momentarily over the keyboard as doubts crept in. Was I being too reckless? I shook my head, dispelling the negative thoughts. This was not recklessness, it was a strategy born from the ashes of betrayal. I recalled the faces of my former colleagues, their smugness as they dismissed me, and the pain it caused. I couldn't allow their perception of me to dictate my worth. I was more than their punchline, and I would make sure they understood that. As I organized my notes, I reflected on the numerous meetings I had attended, the brainstorming sessions that had turned into a one-sided affair where my ideas were often overshadowed. I would reach out to the contacts I had nurtured over the years, reminding them of our collaborations and the successes we had achieved together. I could almost hear the echoes of their voices, the camaraderie we once shared. Those memories spurred me on. I would not let this betrayal erase the legacy I had built. I glanced at the clock, the hands ticking steadily, and felt the weight of time pressing down on me. I needed to act quickly and decisively. The stakes were high, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, fueling my resolve. I would gather evidence, reach out to former clients, and set the stage for a confrontation that would leave them reeling. I would turn the tables and remind them of their reliance on my expertise, making it clear that my removal from the equation was a mistake they would soon regret. In that moment, I felt a shift within myself, a calmness that replaced the tempest of emotions that had consumed me earlier. I was no longer just a victim, I was a strategist, plotting my next move with precision. My heart raced with anticipation as I envisioned the moment of confrontation, the looks of disbelief on their faces as I unveiled the truth behind my dismissal. I could already picture the ripple effects of my actions, how the narrative would change, and how I would reclaim my dignity. With renewed focus, I closed my eyes briefly, allowing the images of victory to wash over me. I would not only disrupt their plans, I would dismantle their complacency, exposing the cracks in their facade. I opened my eyes, feeling invigorated, ready to execute the plan that would not just be about revenge but about reclaiming my worth. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but I was prepared to navigate them with cunning and strategy. As I continued typing, each keystroke felt like a declaration of my intention. I would rise from the ashes of my humiliation, stronger and more determined than ever. The world would not forget Olivia, it would remember me as the force that refused to be erased. And with that thought resonating in my mind, I pressed on, ready to take back control of my narrative and disrupt their plans for good. The atmosphere in the corporate office felt electric, charged with anticipation and a hint of chaos. I could hear the distant sound of voices rising, the buzz of phones ringing, and the clatter of heels against the polished floor, all converging into a cacophony that underscored my purpose. With each step, I felt the smooth surface of the marble beneath my feet, a reminder of the stark contrast between the luxury of the building and the turmoil brewing inside me. My heart raced, and I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I was on the brink of executing a plan that would shake the very foundation of the company that had cast me aside. As I approached the boardroom, the heavy wooden door loomed in front of me, a barrier between my past and the reckoning I was about to unleash. I took a moment to gather myself, inhaling deeply, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. I could almost taste the bitterness of the coffee still lingering on my tongue from earlier, a reminder of the long hours spent crafting my strategy. I would not allow my determination to waver. This was my moment. Pushing the door open, I was met with a scene that felt surreal. The board members were gathered around the sleek, long table, their expressions a mixture of surprise and apprehension. The room smelled faintly of expensive cologne and the faintest hint of anxiety. I stepped inside, my heels clicking purposefully against the floor, drawing their attention. The tension was palpable, they were unprepared for what I had to say. "Thank you all for coming together today," I began, my voice steady but firm, the words spilling out with an intensity that I hoped would command their attention. I could see the shift in their demeanor as they registered my presence, the unease settling heavily in the air. I felt empowered. I was no longer the discarded employee. They had underestimated me, and I would make them pay for that mistake. "I am here to discuss the future of the $720M partnership, a partnership that I helped build and nurture," I stated, watching as their faces shifted from surprise to defensive postures. I could see my former boss's jaw tighten, his eyes narrowing as he tried to regain control of the narrative. "You may have thought my dismissal would silence me, but you've only fueled my resolve." As I spoke, I could feel the weight of their disbelief pressing down on me, but I pushed through, fueled by the fire of my indignation. I had compiled evidence of my contributions, emails, project outlines, and the testimonials of clients who valued my work. Each piece of documentation was a testament to my worth, and I was ready to lay it all bare. Let's not forget the successful campaigns we launched together, the accolades we received, and the clients who depended on my expertise, I continued, my voice rising with passion. I could see my former colleagues exchanging glances, their confidence faltering as I laid out the facts. Your decision to let me go has consequences that extend far beyond my employment. This partnership is at risk without my knowledge and experience guiding it. The room began to buzz with murmurs as the realization of what I was saying settled in. I could feel their discomfort, and it was exhilarating. I had become the storm they never anticipated. I watched as my former boss shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence cracking beneath the weight of my words. You may think you can erase me, but I refuse to be a mere footnote in your corporate history. I will not allow you to jeopardize what we built together. I will rally our clients and former partners to remind them of my value. I will make sure they know who truly contributed to the success of this partnership, I declared, relishing the power surging through me. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, each heartbeat echoing my determination. The expressions around the table morphed from disbelief to concern, and I seized the moment. I am giving you a choice. Acknowledge my contributions and work with me to secure the future of this partnership, or watch as it crumbles without my expertise. The choice is yours, but I assure you, I will not be sidelined any longer. Silence enveloped the room as my words hung in the air, heavy with implications. I could hear the faint sound of my own heartbeat, a reminder that this was my moment of triumph. I had turned the tables and the power dynamics had shifted. I was no longer the victim, I was the architect of my own destiny. As I stood there, a mixture of triumph and relief washed over me. I had taken back control of my narrative, and the tension in the room began to dissolve. I could see the wheels turning in their minds, the recognition of my value dawning upon them. I had disrupted their complacency, and the fight was far from over, but I had made my mark. I was Olivia, and I would not be forgotten. The stakes were high, but I was ready for whatever came next. My journey had just begun, and I was determined to see it through to the end. With that thought, I turned and walked out of the boardroom, each step a reminder of my strength and resilience. I had executed my plan, and the repercussions would be felt throughout the company. I could almost hear the echoes of my mother's words in my mind, urging me to stand tall. I had risen from the ashes of my humiliation, ready to reclaim my place in the corporate world and forge a new path forward. The aftermath of my confrontation echoed through the corporate corridors like a distant thunder, reverberating against the polished walls of my former workplace. I stepped outside, the sun warm against my skin, a stark contrast to the chill that had settled in my heart. The air was fragrant with the scent of blooming flowers from the nearby park, an ironic reminder of life moving forward, even as I grappled with the reality of my actions. My fingers trembled slightly as I clutched the strap of my bag, filled with notes and evidence I had meticulously gathered, the weight of my choices heavy on my shoulders. In the days that followed, I found solace in the company of my best friend, who had become my anchor in this turbulent sea. We sat in a cozy cafe, the aroma of freshly ground coffee enveloping us like a warm embrace. You did what you had to do, Olivia, she said, her eyes bright with encouragement as she stirred her latte. I could see the concern etched on her face, but beneath that concern lay a glimmer of pride. You reminded them of your worth. That takes guts. I nodded, though a part of me still wrestled with doubts. I had disrupted their complacency, but at what cost? As I gazed out the window, watching people bustle by, I wondered about the repercussions of my actions. Would my former colleagues retaliate? Would the partnership I fought to protect crumble under the weight of my defiance? The stakes were high, and the uncertainty gnawed at me like a persistent ache. Later that week, I received a call from a former client, their voice filled with warmth and familiarity. Olivia, we've been hearing about your recent endeavors. I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Your contributions are still valued here, and we'd love to work with you again. The words washed over me like a balm, soothing the raw edges of my anxiety. I could feel the flicker of hope igniting inside me, a reminder that my efforts had not gone unnoticed. As I ventured into the world of job interviews, I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Each meeting was an opportunity to redefine my narrative, to show potential employers that I was not just a casualty of corporate politics, but a resilient professional ready to take on new challenges. I wore my favorite blazer, a deep navy that made me feel powerful, and with each handshake I felt the weight of my past begin to lift. One evening, as I returned home, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. My reflection stared back, a woman marked by resilience, not defeat. I smiled softly, a newfound confidence radiating from within. I was no longer dwelling in the shadows of my past. I was stepping into the light of new possibilities. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother, her words offering encouragement as she always did. You've always been strong, Olivia. I believe in you. That night, I sat on my balcony, the city lights twinkling like stars against the night sky. I took a deep breath, the cool air filling my lungs with a sense of clarity. I reflected on my journey, the humiliation, the anger, the fight for my dignity, and I realized that I had transformed that pain into purpose. I would not allow my past to define me. Instead, I would use it as fuel to propel me forward. In the weeks that followed, I received an offer from a startup that recognized my expertise and valued my contributions. The excitement bubbled within me as I accepted the position, knowing that this was the beginning of a new chapter. I had reclaimed my power, and in doing so, I had forged a path toward a future filled with promise. I felt lighter, as if the chains of my previous experience had finally been broken. As I looked toward the horizon, I understood that the journey ahead would not be without challenges, but I was ready to face them head-on. I had learned the importance of resilience, of standing firm in the face of adversity, and I would carry that lesson with me. I was Olivia, and I would continue to write my story, one filled with strength, determination, and hope for the future. The sunlight streamed through my window, casting a warm glow that felt like a new beginning. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of coffee cradled in my hands, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past few months. The journey from humiliation to empowerment had transformed me in ways I could never have anticipated. I had risen from the ashes of my old life, fueled by a fire that ignited with each act of defiance against those who had underestimated me. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they served as reminders of my resilience, not my defeat. As I glanced around my apartment, I felt a sense of pride swell within me. The walls were adorned with reminders of my achievements, each one a testament to my strength. I thought about the new job I had accepted, the supportive team that valued my contributions, and the clients who believed in my vision. I was no longer just Olivia, I was a force to be reckoned with, someone who had reclaimed her narrative. I had learned that true power comes from within, and that my worth was not defined by the opinions of others. With a deep breath, I turned my attention to the camera set up in front of me, ready to share my story with others who might be struggling in silence. I wanted them to know that they were not alone, that they too could rise above their challenges. I spoke with conviction, my voice steady as I shared my journey of resilience and determination. If you've ever felt powerless, remember that you hold the pen to your own story. Don't let anyone erase your worth. As I wrapped up my message, I felt a surge of hope for those who would hear my words. I wanted to empower them, to ignite that same fire within their hearts. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, I encouraged, inviting them to join me on this journey of growth and inspiration, reminding them that together, we could rewrite our narratives and embrace the power of resilience.